Well, here we are on the Get Foxy show. This morning, we have the lovely Joanna Kleinman. Joanna, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this morning.
Having me. It's my pleasure.
I'm curious, how is it that you kind of got into what you're doing? I mean,
Mm.
how did you grow up? Was therapy something that came natural to you, or did you choose this profession? Did it choose you? How did all this come about?
Well, I guess a little bit of both, right? My mother is a brilliant psychotherapist, and so from a pretty early age, both of my parents were into self growth and personal development. Now, this is back in the 70s, right? I was born in 1970. So they started really getting into it, I would say maybe around, I don't know, 77, 78, when I was a little girl. So I started doing some self growth and self development programs with them, but I didn't really, I was a little girl, so I didn't know anything about that. But here's what I distinctly remember. I was probably about 12 or 13. And I was sitting in a program, and I watched this woman at the front of the room. We were sitting sort of in an auditorium, and I watched this. He was basically a coach, and he coached her to shift her perspective and her mindset about, I think it was her marriage or something like that. And I was just completely transfixed, because it was at that moment where I saw the power of shifting the thoughts in your mind, and that can literally create an entirely different life moving forward. And I decided in that moment, that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. And I really never looked back. And so it's certainly been a journey to, in terms of the business that I have now. But I literally have been on a nonstop journey for myself in personal growth and development that I took on for myself by the time I was 19, and I'm going to be 50 in November. And so I've really never stopped with my own personal growth and development and transformation. And that is really what I think is at the foundation of what makes me a powerful psychotherapist.
That's amazing. It's
Yeah.
it's so fascinating to hear people's kind of origin stories.
Yes. Yes. Which I think really, first, I swear, I think that sometimes we're just, born into, what we're meant to do. And that's kind of how I feel for myself.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
I wanted to have you on the show because you run Dethroning Your Inner Critic.
That's the name of
And
it. That's right. Mm-hmm.
the more I've been working with women in my own practice, the more I'm learning that, holy moly, do women in our culture have this inner voice that just
Yeah.
picks at them constantly.
Awful.
So
Yeah.
where does this inner critic come from, do you think,
Yeah.
in your opinion?
Well, so here's what I'm going to say. It's really every single human, like I don't know how many we are, 8 billion or something? I don't know. But it's really every human that has an inner critic. But the difference is that men's inner critics show up very differently than women's inner critics. But the way that I define the inner critic is, it is the voice that speaks to us from the moment we get up to the moment we go to bed. It's really the automatic voice in our minds that's speaking to us. And most people think that inner voice is them, right? That they and their just their mind chatter is one and the same. And very often, where that voice goes to is in something that we are trying to either fix or change or perfect or manage, or some arrival point to get to in our lives. Because the way that we get conditioned automatically to think is whatever it is that I say I want or I need, that's the thing that's going to have me feel the way that I want to feel. So we keep looking out there into the external world, and it could be I need this person to make me feel the way I want to feel, right? I need this relationship. I need this child to make me feel the way I want to feel. I need this amount of money. I need this career. I need this body. Whatever it is, we're conditioned to look externally, and our culture that we live in now has really compounded that to the point where um, in my personal experience, I think that we are more unfulfilled and unhappy really than ever before. I think it's, while the advent of social media in so many ways has, done some wonderful things, I think it also has us comparing ourselves and our lives to an idealized version of who we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to have and what we're supposed to manage. And I think that particularly for women, the issue with women is that we have kind of bought into this idea, and it's been building for several decades, that we are supposed to have it all, right? We're supposed to be the perfect moms and the perfect wives and the perfect, look a particular way, and we're supposed to, have the perfect careers, and and we're at the point where we keep comparing ourselves to this version of who we're supposed to be that we're never going to fulfill. And we're getting more and more and more unhappy, overwhelmed, anxious, dissatisfied. And, as a mom of 3 kids, I can see that when I was buying into that for myself, um, the experience that I had of myself and my life was, no matter what my life was, it just wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. My life wasn't enough. And then, so those thoughts, those automatic thoughts, created feelings of dissatisfaction, unhappiness, anxiety. And it really impacted who I was being, even as a mom, to my kids, right? I was very attached to, right? I didn't realize how attached I was, but I was very attached to, I needed my kids to be a particular way so that I could feel like I was doing a good enough job as a mom. So I was, they needed to be respectful, and they needed to, and I have good kids, it's right. But I was trying to control parts of them that as moms we don't have control over. We really have a lot less control than we think over who our children become. So it permeates so many different layers, right? Because pain gets passed from generation to generation, because if you've got this mind that keeps telling you you're not enough, and then you're parenting through that lens, then you're creating children that also feel that they're not enough, right? And it's like this this vicious cycle. And that's really how Dethroning Your Inner Critic was born, because here I was on this, self-growth journey since I was 19 years old, and, really wanting to understand how to master my mind to feel the way that I wanted to feel, and I got to a point in my life where I recognized, wow, like, even though I've been doing all of this, personal growth, I am still really, overwhelmed and unhappy and unfulfilled. And that it was really in that this whole journey to dethrone my own inner critic was formed. And so the thing that I love about the work that I do is that I'm doing it right alongside with, right, all of the hundreds of people that I'm working with, because this is, managing our minds it's like exercise, right? It's ongoing. If we want to stay in shape, we can't like exercise for, even a few months and be like, oh, okay, great. I'm in shape. I never have to do this again. Right. So it's like this ongoing journey of how do we think in such a way right now that fosters feelings of gratitude and joy and love and pride in ourselves and value right now, so that we know now I am good enough right now, and there's no place I need to get to, and there's nothing I need to change or fix or perfect or manage. And that's, I feel so blessed to be able to do this work, because I really do think that the more people that know how to think, now, we're not taught that, right? We just think automatically, but we're not taught how to think. So the more people that know how to think to create those feelings now, the better our world will be.
Amen to that. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah.
There's so many layers
Mhm.
to this.
It's
And
unbelievable.
I definitely see some of that in my own office,
Yes.
especially with the work that I do with aesthetic and facial acupuncture and trying to help women look younger. Uh,
Yes.
some of these women are so bent on being a specific way, and one of the things I like to talk with them about is this the thought. Well, I got the idea from Dr. Zanna Hackett, who put together something called the Ultimate Life Tool. But
Mhm.
the general idea is that we are souls kind of wrapped in a fleshly vehicle.
You're right.
And when you look out into a parking lot, you see all kinds of different vehicles. And
Mhm.
each vehicle has been made for a specific kind of purpose. And so, depending upon where that vehicle is at, they have strengths and weaknesses.
Yes.
And so, you're not going to put an old Ford F 150 on a NASCAR racetrack.
Right.
You're not going to take a Corvette off roading. And
Mhm.
each vehicle needs its own specific kind of maintenance, its own kind of fuel, its own kind of foods. Our bodies need those kind of foods. Uh, Different tires, different parts, all of these things make up these individual vehicles. And so if we start looking at our bodies like these vehicles, then pretty soon we're not comparing ourselves to this person over here, because they're a completely different vehicle. I'm
Yes.
my own vehicle.
Yep.
And that
Yes.
sounds very similar to, I think, what you're talking about here.
Very, very similar. The beauty industry, the diet industry is really it's built upon this notion that um if I look like that, if I have this body, if I if I look this way, that's going to be the thing that's finally going to make me feel like I'm good enough. And I mean, this is why this industry is, multi billions of dollars a year, right? Because it's built upon that notion. And then what happens is, and we probably all know people personally. I certainly know I've worked with many people who have lost all the weight, right? And they've gotten the, whatever the stuff done to their face. And right, they've reached that goal, that arrival point, and they still feel the same way. And you can find this all over the place, right? I mean, all we have to do is look at Hollywood, right? Hollywood, here are the richest, most, successful, most beautiful people on the planet, and they are killing themselves, right? Literally. I mean, like committing suicide or drug addicted or whatever, because very often it is that automatic voice, right? It is that inner critic that says, once I get there, that's the answer. And so they keep, getting to the next level and getting to the next level and getting to the next level, and leave kind of, a trail of dead bodies along the way, right? And get to a point where they reach a plateau where they've gotten everything that they set out to get, right? There's no place else to get to, and yet they still feel broken. And that's what needs to, shift. In my opinion, that's the work that I do with people, is in really understanding that it is not out there. It is all mastering your internal life that really is the key to life. It's the key to everything. And, unfortunately, in our culture, people have to get to the point where they're so broken or so unhappy before they wake up to realize this, and if you never get to that point where you're so unhappy, then you're just kind of coasting through life. You're kind of leading, for many people, what is sort of a mediocre life, which is unfortunate, right? Because it really, the thing that is so astounding, I have this, I work with people individually, but I also have a 6-month program called Mastering Your Mind. And it's amazing just by learning to think differently. I mean, people literally transform marriages, businesses, like all sorts of relationships. It's in a very short period of time, because they're just fundamentally altering what they've always believed to be true. Because, our beliefs are nothing more than thoughts that we've thought over and over and over and over and over. So when you really change the way that you think and you practice that every single day, you start to change the beliefs that you've been dragging around with you that you thought were like truths or facts.
I've experienced this myself just within the last handful of years, where I went through some training and started questioning my own thoughts. For
Yes.
example, I'd get in a fight with my wife, and immediately the story that was running is, well, she's doing that on purpose. She's being malicious. And then I have to ask myself, okay, well, is that true?
Yeah.
Is
Right.
that really the case?
That's right. Yeah.
And by questioning my own thinking, all of a sudden it's like, oh, the light bulb comes on. Well, no, of course she's not being malicious. She's not a malicious person. So what is the reasoning behind this? And how did you yourself play into that mess?
Right. Which then transforms the way that you might feel in the moment about your wife, right? Which then
Yes.
has you, and then those feelings have you taking different actions in your relationship with her, which then actually changes the trajectory of your relationship, right? So, I mean, that's such a brilliant example because it's so powerful. And that's just one little tiny example. But if you're doing this on a regular basis, right, with your relationship with yourself first and foremost, right, and then with the people that matter to you the most, and you're actually thinking about, wow, what are the parts of my life right now that I do feel really grateful for? What are the parts that are already working? And what do I already love about myself? It changes everything inside. It's really profound.
It's amazing stuff.
Yes, it is.
So I'm
It
going to
really,
ask you the question that I ask all my guests.
yes.
And that is, what is your definition of Foxy? What does being Foxy mean to Joanna?
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, that's my maiden name. So, right? I have a lot of definitions of Foxy, but oh, such a good question. So, I think that there is nothing foxier or sexier than inner confidence and inner self love. And so that is what I cultivate every day with my own mind. Um, and listen, I like feeling attractive. I do. Right? But what I really think is that attractiveness starts on the inside, right? How I treat myself, how I treat my body, The behaviors that I do all across the board, right? The quality of my relationships, the things I'm doing in my free time, right? The way I'm loving and valuing and honoring myself starts in my mind. And right. So I think that when we exude that, happiness, joy, fulfillment, aliveness, when we feel like we're living these abundant lives, it's not because of the experiences that we're having. Okay. The experiences that we're having are a result of the thoughts that we're having. Because that's how our lives go. It's our thoughts that create our emotions, and our emotions create our actions, and then our actions create our lives. So I guess to answer the roundabout answer to your question is, I think what's Foxy is having a really awesome mind.
So how do we go, or I guess, what would be the first step? I think that's a better question. What would be the first step in
Yes.
beginning to have a better mind?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm going to say that the very first step is becoming aware of the voice of your mind and what it's saying. So it's not even changing what it's saying. It's just really doing the inner work of stepping back and observing it. What what are the thoughts that I'm having right now that are making me feel this feeling of anger, frustration, sadness, loneliness, right? Just observing the thoughts, because we can't alter that which we can't even see. And so, part of our culture, we don't want to look at those thoughts. We don't want to feel those feelings. So we do this, right? We avoid them. We numb them, right? We run away from them. And so it's very counterintuitive to actually turn towards it and to see it for what it is. And I call that voice, that's your old computer programming, right? It started a long, long time ago, and it's been saying the same stuff for forever, right? So the version that you have at, let's say, 50, right? I'm almost 50. So the version that you have at 50 is the same version that you had at 20, which is the same version that you had at 8, right? It's just your 8-year-old self, was jealous because Susie had more stickers than you did, right? And now your 50-year-old version is jealous of your, neighbor because they have more money than you did. But it's the same inner thing. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah. So that's the first step, is really being willing to examine your mind and to do the work of actually using your emotions as the tool to do that. Because your thoughts create your emotions, right? So if you're running away from emotions that you don't want to feel, most people say, like, I don't want to feel the bad emotions. I only want to feel the good emotions, right? But half of life goes the way we want it to, half of life doesn't. Half of life we're feeling the way we want, half of life we don't. So if you're running away from those emotions, you're running away from half of your life. And I really think that living all of your life, right? If you can feel all of your emotions, then you can go forward in your life and you don't really have to be afraid of anything. You can risk failure, you can risk rejection, you can risk all the things that people are like, oh, I'm not going there, right? I'm not going to do anything that's going to make me judged or, not liked. But that's where the beauty of life takes place. Because how are we supposed to live our most powerful lives if we're not really willing to take risks of failure and rejection and, being judged? We can't.
If people want more information from you, because this is big stuff,
It is profound. It really is.
how
It's
do they find you,
really
Joanna?
good. Well, so my website is dethroningyourinnercritic.com. I have a podcast of the same name. It's a content driven podcast for the most part. So it's got really juicy content. A lot of people, use it as their free therapy. So that's Dethroning Your Inner Critic. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I work with people all over the world, which, right, with the, advent of Zoom, it's a beautiful thing. So I have clients all over the world. And then I also have these amazing Mastering Your Mind programs where I bring groups of women together for 6 months, where we're all on this amazing structured journey together of learning step by step by step how to rewire a completely new mind. And that's been just absolutely unbelievable. So, if any of your listeners are resonating with this and, want more information, I offer a free 30-minute clarity conversation where you can get to know me, and you can, and we'll explore, where this work might have an impact for you. So that's a great thing to do, is go to my website, dethroningyourinnercritic.com, and schedule a free clarity session.
Excellent. I couldn't put it any better. I will have all of the pertinent information in the show notes. So y'all definitely check out Dethroning Your Inner Critic. Joanna, we're up on time already, if you can believe it. So
That's wonderful. It's been great.
thank you so much for taking the time. And I want to honor you. I appreciate you for bringing more positivity and light into the world. You are doing amazing stuff.
Thanks so much, Terry. Thanks for having me.